Good day, fish tankers. So you've been bitten by the aquarium bug and you decided you're getting an aquarium. It's going down this weekend. You're going to set it all up and you're heading towards your local fish store to go and buy everything that you need. Sometimes all that excitement and enthusiasm can turn into heartbreak. So watch this short video before you buy that aquarium and avoid making these 5 beginner mistakes. Stick around. Okay, fish tankers, mistake number 1 is starting too small, and I am referring to tank size. Now, nano tanks are all the rage. I've got 2 of them myself, but if you start with too small a tank, you're making your chances of success a bit less. Nano tanks are not really the best option in my opinion for beginners, because all your mistakes will be magnified. Now, they are not, I think, inherently unstable as people say. All the same rules apply, but if you make a mistake like overfeeding, it's going to be a much bigger problem in a small tank than in a bigger tank that will be more forgiving. The other thing about small tanks is when you're new in the hobby, you're excited, you're like a kid in a candy store, and you start getting Noah's Ark syndrome. You want 2 of everything, and a small tank has got limited stocking options in terms of a kind of fish you can keep, and of course you can't keep many fish in it, so inevitably they get overstocked. So rather forget about your small tanks, the 5 gallon, the 10 gallon and even the 7 gallon tanks. Rather get something bigger. Now, a 15 and a 20 gallon tank is still in the upper range of a nano tank. That's your standard 2-foot tank or your 2-foot high. That's a good size to start with. I wouldn't start any smaller than that. I've made another video about what I think is the ideal tank size for a beginner. But in general, I would think that buy the biggest tank that you can afford and have space for isn't bad advice to go by. That leads us to the second mistake, which is too much too soon. You've got everything set up, it's bubbling away there and it's looking really nice in your lounge, and at the local fish store or at a friend's house, you've seen an aquarium set up that you really like, you've made a list of all those fish, and off you go to the local fish store, you get all those fish on the list and you put them in your aquarium. Then to top it all off, they are not pets that you can stroke or pet, so you feed them, it's nice interaction, and the second day there's a couple of them dead and the others are looking uncomfortable, and by the third day everything in your aquarium is dead. So you are feeling terrible, you go back to the store, you buy more fish, they take a little longer this time, but then they all die again, and if you're still sticking with it by the third try, then most of them are going to start to survive maybe. Now, I blame the unscrupulous aquarium stores for this tendency that happens. Most of them are a lot better now, and they'll tell you beforehand that the aquarium is an ecosystem and there's something called the nitrogen cycle. Now, there are many good videos about it, but basically fish secrete ammonia into the water as well as any uneaten food, and that's highly toxic to fish. And that needs to convert it by beneficial aerobic bacteria to nitrite, NO2, which is still highly toxic. And then a third group of bacteria converts that into nitrate, NO3, which is only harmful in large quantities. And there are other ways like water changes, how we eliminate that. But in order for that bacteria to establish, you need a bit of time. Now, there are many bacteria in the bottle type of products on the market. I'm not going to talk about that because I have actually never used them. There are people who say they are useless, it's just a marketing gimmick. There are others that say they are great, and there are people that say some are better than others, some work better than others. I would think the third one is probably closer to the truth, but I've never done that, and I haven't cycled the tank in a long while because I have multiple tanks and all my tanks have at least 2 smaller filters going on rather than 1 big one. So if I have a new tank, I take one of the filters out of an established tank, put it in the new aquarium, and then replace that filter in the old aquarium because there's already another established filter there, and I have an instant cycle. Now, you may not be as lucky, but maybe you can find, I would say the best way is if you can find an established dirty filter from an established aquarium or some old media from a filter that's already matured and put it in your filter. That's the best way to prevent this from happening. But let's say maybe you don't have access to that and you have to start from scratch. In the days when I managed a pet store long ago, back in the 90s, what I told people is just set everything up, chuck in a pinch of flake food in there and wait for 2 weeks. And then we test the water. If there's any ammonia or nitrite, NO2, we wait a little bit longer. And once ammonia and nitrite is 0, that's when you can start putting in fish. If you have something like aqua soil or a dirted tank, that will leach some ammonia into the aquarium initially, so you don't need to add a pinch of flake food. Just wait for the ecosystem to develop and for ammonia and nitrite to hit 0. Now you must also remember, you can't put all the fish in once because there's only a small amount of beneficial bacteria that's developed. So if, for instance, you're going to have a tank with 6 Corydoras at the bottom, maybe 10 neon tetras in the middle, and another 10 Harlequin rasboras up top, then you start by maybe first adding 5 of the neon tetras, and the next week another 5. And then you can add the 6 Corydoras a week after that. And so you gradually stock your aquarium. Never take all the fish at once and put them in a new aquarium. And the other thing that you must keep in mind, especially in a new tank, it's crucial, feed very sparingly. Feed enough different kinds of food that everybody gets something to eat, but the Corydoras or the Otto sinkless algae eaters at the bottom get something too, but don't overdo it. Do err on the side of caution and feed very sparingly. And then if you do these things, you can avoid the dreaded new tank syndrome that gets people out of a hobby. Now, the third mistake is getting the wrong fish. Now, the aquarium stores have gotten better. I see many of them have little labels on the tank, but you also have to take some of the responsibility. People talk about doing your research. I'm from an academic background. It's not even research. It's just called reading up on Google. It's easier than ever. Before, I had to use libraries that didn't have information in my day. But just Google the fish you want and then take the consensus opinion of a couple of websites, and there you go. Now, buying the wrong fish, it results in 2 kinds of problems. The first one is aggression, because most beginners want a community tank with different species of fish. And I find that aggression problems usually start with these 3 groups of fish. It's not exclusively them, but you have to really have a red flag with these fish and do your reading up beforehand. Number 1, I would say, are cichlids. They're nice and colorful fish. They're very personable because they take care of their young, but that also makes them very territorial and very aggressive. So beware of cichlids. Number 2, I would say, are barbs, especially tiger barbs. They're very active, colorful fish, but they can be nippy. They are fin nippers. And the third group that I often see problems developing are puffer fish. Now, they're very personable, intelligent fish. They're a great wet pet, but all the way from the bigger sort of puffers like the figure 8 puffer or the green spotted puffer, all the way to the tiny pea puffers. These puffer fish are not community fish. They've got sharp little beaks and they like taking chunks out of their tank mates with those beaks. Now, of course, you get exceptions to the rule. Dwarf cichlids like a single apistogramma type male in a community tank will work great. I've got cherry bobs in the intro to all my videos. They are great community fish as well. And I've seen the odd person with a huge tank that's heavily planted, making pea puffers work in a community setup. But don't gamble on exceptions. Rather go for the general rule to give yourself the best chance of success. The second thing with buying the wrong fish, you are not aware of a size that the fish may grow to for your tank. And once again, you are to blame for not doing your reading, as well as a local fish store for selling you a fish that's entirely unsuitable for that 15-gallon tank. And I'm talking about maybe that golden severum that looks so cute and personable. Now that it's a small fish, but it's going to be huge, as well as that bala shark, they grow huge. Not to mention the real monster fish like arowanas, and even though it's not quite a monster fish, a little Oscar looks very cute, it becomes a huge fish. So don't buy fish that are too big. The fourth mistake that people make is too much light. You've patiently built up the stocking levels in your tank, it's running nicely, and now we like to watch our aquarium. So typically you switch the light on in the morning when you wake up, and then you come home after work, you have dinner, you watch a little TV, you watch the aquarium, and then you switch it off when you go to bed, and the tank has 12 hours plus worth of light there, and pretty soon it's overrun by a mess of algae. Now, most of the LED lights these days, you can set the brightness, so set the brightness. Most tanks don't need the full brightness, so turn it down a little bit, and then also set the timer. Some of these lights have their own little built-in timer. If they do not have that, get yourself an electrical timer, get the electronic timer, not these old dial types. They lose their program when we have load shedding or power failures, and set your lights to 6 hours a day. And then you can see how it goes, and you can turn it up a notch and maybe end with 8 hours or whatever is necessary for your tank. But don't put it on full brightness unless it's a very tall tank, then you may need to, and start with 6 hours a day and put that light on a timer. Now, the fifth and the final rookie mistake that I'm going to talk about, it's not the final in your fish keeping career, but these are the ones that I find beginners usually do, and that is your tank's running great and you decide you're just going to change, you're going to give it a good clean, you do a partial water change, and you're going to change out these cartridges and sponges for new ones in your filter, and suddenly the fish start dying. Or you take out the sponge and you do what I used to do that made this mistake as a kid. You wash it with very hot water or even boiling water, and now it's super clean and it's nice and sterile. Now, cleanliness in an aquarium does not equal sterile environments. A sterile environment is death to a fish. Why would your fish start dying? Because you've destroyed almost all your beneficial bacteria, because most of them resides on the filter media, and now there's nothing to convert ammonia to nitrate, and everything starts dying. It's new tank syndrome all over again. So when you clean your filter, you don't have to do it too often. If you see the flow slows down, or maybe if it's a sponge filter, maybe every 4, 5, 6 weeks, depending on your stocking density, take that filter media, if there are sponges or bio rings, and wash them in the old tank water that you pour out. Never wash them under the hot tap, and never replace everything at once. Your chemical media, if you want to use it like carbon or purigen, you can replace those, but that won't be the only media that you have. The sponges or the bio rings, when they get clogged, you just wash them and rinse them out in old aquarium water and put them back. If they get so worn out, the sponges, and that takes years to happen, that you have to replace them, then cut them in half and replace half at a time. So never replace all your filter media at once, and never replace a filter with a new filter with new media and chuck out the old one. Say you've got hang-on back that's working very nicely, you're going to change to a canister, you chuck away the hang-on back and you put on the canister, and now you've got this great filter, but everything is dying. Once again, you threw away your bacteria. Don't do that. Run them alongside each other for a month or two, and then you only start changing them out. Or better still, take the media from the old filter, put it in a new filter. So that's it from me, guys. If you find the content helpful, please give us a thumbs up. Thanks for everybody who inquired about my dog, my little dachshund Lulu. She's much better. She's walking around again. The back legs aren't 100% yet, but she's getting there. And please hit that subscribe button. I will greatly appreciate that. And until I see you again, keep taking good care of those domestic denizens of the deep.